Alright, let's talk about anticipation. When serving cross-court, the racket contact point is slightly more in front. So for a down-the-line serve, the first bounce is usually closer to the body. For instance, if the first bounce is here, it's a cross-court serve. If it's suddenly over here, it's almost certainly down the line. Or if it's towards the middle, they definitely can't serve wide cross-court. The second clue to read is the racket head. Its angle is very important. Whichever way the racket head faces, that's where the ball will go. Facing this way means cross-court, facing the middle is middle, and facing the forehand goes to the forehand side. The third is body rotation. For a cross-court serve, the body can stay still, but it's very unlikely for a down-the-line serve. A down-the-line serve almost always involves a slight weight shift, whereas a cross-court serve is more of a push forward. Next, we use the first bounce to judge the length. If the first bounce is in this zone, it's definitely a short or half-long ball. If the first bounce is in this area, it's usually a long serve, although professional players can serve short from this spot. For most amateur players, the first bounce for a long serve is usually here, and for a short serve, it's here. We can judge the length of the serve by its first bounce. Second, the backswing for a long serve will be relatively larger, while it will be smaller for a short serve. This makes the length obvious. Third, watch if they use force in their backswing. This isn't absolute, but it's true most of the time. If the arm is tense, it's a long serve. If it's relaxed, it's a short serve. Many players stand too close when judging length and get jammed by long serves. After your opponent serves short to you, you'll get completely jammed if you then try to receive a long serve. You need to be bold and stand further back to defend against long serves, because they are too fast. For example, if I'm here preparing for their short forehand serve, I have plenty of time even if I react a bit slowly. So you can afford to be a bit slower on your opponent's short serves, but you can't back up in time for a long one. Amateur players should focus their attention on the long serve. For short serves, I can move in and use a flick, banana flick, push, or short push. But for a long serve, you can't hit while backing up. So to receive long serves, you must maintain your distance from the table. This distance is crucial. Then you can execute your shot. Now let's talk about spin. Remember to receive on the same side. For all left side spin serves, angle your racket to the left. For all right side spin serves, angle your racket to the right. This is the mirror principle for receiving spin. I'm going to serve 3 balls now. Tell me which one was side spin topspin. 1, 2, 3. Okay, out of these 3 balls, which one was side spin topspin? Correct. The second one was side spin topspin. When your opponent's motion is downward, your backswing must be lower than the ball. One more time. As soon as their motion starts going down, get your racket lower than the ball. Your backswing should be lower than the incoming ball. When their motion is forward, your racket should be behind the ball. But this isn't absolute, because advanced players use deceptive motions. For now, let's just focus on making the basic reads, assuming no deception. If he moves down, my backswing goes down. If he moves forward, I get behind the ball. If they move upward, like a hook serve or left side spin topspin serve, my racket needs to be on the upper middle part of the ball. For example, when receiving a hook serve, my racket is on the upper middle part of the ball. If their motion is a downward chop, then you must be careful to spot any deceptive follow-through. Assuming no deception, if they chop down, your backswing, whether forehand or backhand, must be lower than the ball. If they move forward, you need to watch the moment of contact to detect deception. Otherwise, just place your racket behind the ball. If they move upward, you need to close your racket angle. If he moves down, I get below the ball. Using the forehand as an example. He goes down, I go down too. When he moves forward, I get behind the ball. If he moves upward, I get on top of the ball. Of course, if there's deception, that's a different story. If his serving motion looks like this, but you think it's a topspin serve, then you need to sharpen your anticipation skills. This is actually a backspin serve. Now let's talk about pushing. If his motion is up, you push down. If his motion is down, you push forward. If his motion is down, you push forward. If his motion is up, you push down. As long as his forearm has an upward motion, you must push downward. If you just push your forearm forward, the ball will fly off the table. It's the same for the backhand. If his racket and forearm go down, I have to push forward. When his forearm starts moving up, I have to push downward to keep the ball's trajectory low. Next, let's discuss backspin. For example, this serve looks very powerful, but actually I put no spin on it. I'm just pretending to use force. That's a deceptive motion. The ball went long, which means there was no spin. So you get tricked, thinking that a serve with a fierce expression must be spinny. You have to watch the opponent's performance. Sometimes a casual-looking serve has heavy backspin, while the one with a grimace is actually a no-spin ball. A very spinny ball will definitely have two common characteristics. First, the fingers and wrist will definitely be active. Second, the fingers and wrist will definitely accelerate. We can classify serves as advanced, intermediate, and basic. An advanced serve, the spinniest, uses the wrist and also accelerates. A normally spinny serve has one of those factors. For example, using the wrist but without speed, or not using the wrist but with high speed. A serve like this, where I use my wrist and accelerate, is super spinny. If I only use my wrist, or I don't use my wrist but the motion is fast, that's a normal backspin serve. The third type is when there's no wrist action and no speed. This is a light backspin or no-spin serve. If you push a light backspin serve, it will pop up high. This is a basic level serve. I'll serve one. Can you judge what kind of serve it is? Does this serve belong to the advanced, intermediate, or basic category? Correct, advanced. How should you handle a very spinny ball? The spinnier it is, the softer your touch needs to be when sending it back. If you use force, you will hit the net 100% of the time, because a stiff hand gets caught by the spin. For a very spinny ball, your hand must be more relaxed, a 5/10 grip, and you must guide it back softly. Don't squeeze the racket or accelerate. A serve like this is just extremely spinny. When receiving normal spin or light backspin, you can use power to add more spin by accelerating with your fingers and wrist. So, to avoid being beaten by backspin, you must differentiate. For heavy spin, guide it back softly. For light spin, use explosive power and squeeze the racket on impact. Next, let's talk about looping. The more backspin on the ball, the more you need to open your racket angle. The spinnier the ball, the more open your racket angle should be. This also applies to pen hold. For a very spinny ball, don't close your racket face, open it slightly. For example, this ball is very spinny. If you open your racket a bit, it becomes much easier to loop. But this won't work for light backspin. For instance, an opponent's sidespin backspin serve, if you just hit it, it goes into the net. If you try to loop it, it goes long. What do you do then? You can't close the racket face, because you'll hit the net against backspin. Although pros emphasize closing the racket to generate spin, the prerequisite is getting the ball on the table. In this situation, you need a smaller motion and an earlier stop to your follow-through. These half-spinny, half-dead balls are very awkward. To handle them, use a smaller motion and stop it earlier. The looping technique doesn't change, just make the motion smaller and stop it earlier. For spinny balls, open the racket face. The motion doesn't need to change, just drive forward through it. For a no-spin ball, use a slightly smaller motion, stop it earlier, and don't try to loop it so aggressively upward. Next, let's address the problem of receiving long balls to the forehand. Many people can't get in front of the ball because their footwork isn't there. First, the feet. You must use a cross step. Step across. The cross step is the fastest way to move. So you can't get into position, get set, and then wait to hit the ball. There's no time for that. For example, when the opponent serves, you move over but you can't wait. If you wait, you'll be late. As you move over, don't hesitate with your stroke. Execute the arm swing immediately. Your feet and hand must move synchronously. Once you get to the forehand side, there's no time to get set, rotate your waist, and find your center of gravity. The moment you arrive, you must execute the stroke immediately. Our instinct when we feel late is to just poke at the ball, but that won't work. Even if you're late, you must still execute a forward motion. As long as you can make contact, you have a chance to get it over. So, when receiving to your forehand, you must use a cross step, extend your arm, and immediately complete the stroke as soon as you're in position. This will greatly increase your return consistency. Join our membership to unlock daily exclusive shorts, and discover the coach's secret tips and tricks on table tennis technique. You'll also get our weekly on-court coaching series. Silver members get even more and also unlock the exclusive weekly Coach's Corner series. Thank you for supporting the channel's growth.